And we're live high in the skies of the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport here on the WCEG network on WCEGTalkRadio.com, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Welcome to the People's Choice, and I'm your host, Joe Flint, all one word, like a tribe called Quest. I'm so excited this evening that I have with me in studio a president. Yes, I have the president in the studio with me today. Not Trump, excuse me. I'm sorry. I meant that in the right way. But I have the president of the Atlanta branch of the NAACP. That's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of the most forthright person in the city of Atlanta, Mr. Richard Rose. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
So glad to have you.
Glad for the invitation.
Yes, sir.
Let's get started.
Yes, sir. Listen, I have to tell you this funny story. In 2012, I had the opportunity to give the occasion at the Emancipation Proclamation service. It was held at Friendship Baptist Church that year. And I remember as I was getting my remarks together, at the time, my youngest daughter, who is 15 years old today, was, I want to say, 7 at the time. And I explained to her, she says, "Daddy, what does the NAACP mean?" I said, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And without missing a beat, she turned to me and she said, "Daddy, we colored?" I said, "Well, last I checked, we are." Last I checked, we are. So it just tells me that there's still room for us to get the word out, for people to understand who we are and what we do. So thank you again for being here. Tell us, Mr. Rose, really a little about yourself. I mean, we know you for being the president of the NAACP, but what should we know about Richard Rose?
Well, my profession, I'm an accountant. I'm a certified public accountant. Yes. Native of Memphis, Tennessee, where I started. My first protest was I was about 14 years old. Okay. It was a different time then. We were trying to get into the zoo every day of the week. Yes, sir. And not ride on the back of the bus and other things.
Got you.
Public accommodations.
Okay.
Came to Clark College to study and graduated from Clark College. Went at grad school at Georgia State.
Got you.
I've been involved in community. I got a 36-year-old son.
Got you.
Who's grown and gone.
Got you. I'm looking forward to those days.
And I've always been, sort of in the movement.
Got you.
Fortunately, I've had some great mentors.
Okay.
My mom's first cousin was James Bevel, who one of the early organizers of SCLC.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, he engineered the Birmingham student movement.
Got you.
Selma to Montgomery was his idea.
Yes.
And of course, when I came to Atlanta, I came under the tutelage of Hosea Williams.
Gotcha.
So
unbought and unbossed.
Unbought and unbossed.
Yes, sir.
So grateful for the associations
gotcha.
that helped me, try to do a good job of leadership.
Gotcha.
Because we still need it.
Absolutely.
Atlanta is if spiritually the home of the NAACP.
Absolutely.
W.B. Du Bois was a
yes,
dean
sir.
over Atlanta University.
That's correct.
And as a matter of fact, he insisted on the name colored people because he saw our issues as not necessarily against African descendants, yes, but against all non-white people, including Native Americans.
Got you.
And so he understood white supremacy more than 110 years ago.
Got you. Isn't that something? It's amazing to think about sometimes the history and the heartbeat of Atlanta. I mean, there's a lot, that people come to Atlanta for, but there's so much that they don't know, about what takes place in the history of, if you will, the African-American culture here in the city of Atlanta. Tell us what brought you to, now let me back up a little bit. Basically, leadership and what's the word I want to use? Servant leadership is in your blood.
Well,
it's in the bloodline. And from your story there, it tells me that you've come from a long line of servitude, always wanting to give the best for somebody else. That speaks volumes when it comes to serving in the capacity for which you do now as the president of the Atlanta branch. So tell us, what brought you to this place? What made you decide that now, it's been a few years now, but what made you decide that now is a time that I serve or step up, I should say, and serve in this capacity? And what has continued to keep you moving in that direction?
Well, as you say, I grew up with an attitude of service.
Yes.
My grandfather was a Baptist minister out of Itabena, Mississippi.
Okay, I know exactly where that is.
So, we grew up with the expectation that we had to do something in the community. That just was not an option.
Yes.
And so, as a matter of fact, I had just started my accounting practice, and my mom called me and said, well, are you working with the NAACP? I said, well, Mom, I'm real busy. She said, well, you got to take some time.
Yeah.
You got to take some time. You got to work in NAACP, and you got to work on behalf of your school, as an alumnus of Clark Atlanta University.
Right.
So that's always been there.
Got you.
I was, I'd served on the executive committee. I had been the treasurer.
That's right.
And so it was time. I've been asked to continue to serve, and Dr. White had decided to retire, not to run again. And so, people called me and said, will you come back?
Yes.
And then the question came, would you serve as president?
Got you.
And so, I had lost my mom in 2008. And so that was a big deal for me.
Got you.
And so I always, every day, I carry her in my heart.
Got you.
And when the question came, I asked myself, what would she say?
Yes.
And the answer, I didn't have a choice.
Yes.
Again,
yes.
This is what you must do.
Absolutely.
I'm an accountant. I'm analytical by nature and by profession.
Got you.
And I could see some things that we should be doing.
Okay.
Because this is what I realized when I hit the street in 1962 to talk about about public accommodation. We were out there putting ourselves on the picket line.
Yes.
Question is, what has changed? What had changed between when I decided to run for this office 2014 and that time?
Yes.
Public accommodation has changed.
This is true.
The four pillars on which the NAACP was founded: education, equal justice, economic opportunity, and voting rights. We were still fighting those same battles.
Yes.
And so I thought that we need to look at it and really dissect it to understand why we are still where we are.
What would you say is there's probably not one of the four that's not of greater importance, but what would you say in 2019 is one of the bigger challenges that we face now, or that the association faces in 2019? What would you say is one of the biggest challenges that they face?
Well, I think complacency is a big challenge.
Yes, yes.
And some of it is my generation.
Okay.
My son obviously knows that things have changed since I was his age.
Yes.
But what we've done is too much of acceptance. Oppression come, I think, in four stages.
Okay.
The first reaction to oppression is resistance.
Okay.
The second one is acknowledgement.
Okay.
Say, okay, this is where we are, but I have to figure out how to deal with it.
Got you.
The third is acceptance. And that's where you accept as normal the conditions under which you live.
Right.
Harriet Tubman said, she freed 1,000 slaves. She said, I could have freed 1,000 more.
That's correct.
If they had known they were slaves.
That's correct.
And so the acceptance is part of not knowing that you are entitled to the full equity, the full equality.
Right.
But worse, there is complicity, where members of the oppressed class actually cooperate with the oppressors against their brethren. And we have that. We have that, and I'm not calling names, but we have prominent people in Atlanta who ought to know better.
Yes.
Are complicit, and the complacency doesn't let us speak out against them and call them out.
It's an unfortunate thing, and you don't have to call names, President Rose, but I do it all the time. I don't mind. I don't mind doing it at all. But complacency is a very good place to start when you think about the obstacles that are having to be overcome by the organization. I can remember sometimes people asking, is the NAACP still relevant? And I would ask the question, is voter suppression still taking place?
Amen.
Is racism still in existence? You know, there are a myriad of things that I could continue to list. And so when they would ask that question, I say, well, you answer it by I'll give you an answer by you answering these questions. Right. It's amazing to me, though, that sometimes that people forget the work and the effort and the fight and the cause, the blood, sweat, and tears that have taken place to get us to where we are today. But there's so much more to do. I think complacency is an unfortunate thing in our community, but also in our nation. It's something that, you know, I've learned, and something that I even put forth at work. We just cannot take our foot off the pedal.
We have to be forever vigilant.
Absolutely. Sometimes, you know, we could get to a place where it seems that there's a calm, but then there's the adage that there's a calm before the storm. Right. So if you're not steering the ship in the right direction, you'll find yourself running into that storm, and then you won't be able to steer out of it. Right. And so I'm grateful. I just want to tell you this up front before I forget, for the work and the service that you've already committed to the NAACP and what you continue to do. So what are some of the things that you all have in planning in the days, weeks, and months ahead?
On several fronts. One, you know, we are renewing our focus on young people.
Got you.
It's hard for college students, as we talked about. They have work to do. Yeah. They got scholarship to keep.
That's right.
Jobs to get to. Yeah. So we're going to be focusing on educating the high schoolers. Okay. So that when they get to college, they won't forget what the things they've learned.
Absolutely.
We'll be taking twice monthly buses over to the Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama.
Got you.
Which is a great lesson. Great lesson to learn. We are now organizing for the Get Out the Vote effort for 2020.
Gotcha.
And that must start with voter education.
Oh, yes.
And we will be going out to every gathering place, barbershop talks, beauty shop talks.
Yes.
We've got a committee just designed that is working just on that process.
Gotcha.
So we will continue to do that. You know, one of the things that I did back in 2008 was develop an online app for Rides to the Poll.
Okay.
And we've been coordinating with Helen Butler over the People's Agenda for
That's
that
my
time.
cousin.
Oh, really? Yeah. So that will continue.
Yes.
In this last election, we put it on the iPhone and the Android.
And that's something.
So we got on the app. People drivers will get a notification when somebody has been assigned to them or somebody in their area.
And just go pick them up.
So
how do we combat, and we talked a little about this off the air, how do we combat apathy? How do we combat voter apathy? And how do we, going back to your point of young people who are so engaged in so many things, and honestly, whose attention can be drawn away in a heartbeat, how do we really grab them and say this is important? And I asked this in the contents of something that you mentioned earlier when you said your generation. Again, I mentioned Reverend Love a little while ago, and he always says something, and this, I have the greatest amount of respect for him. When I hosted once before a voter registration event and tried to rally all of the organizations in Atlanta, he said something. He said, my generation, he says, I blame us, because once we got the right, we didn't always share the story of how we got the right.
Well, I agree with him.
And he said, because of that, going back to complacency, he said, because of that, our children have just decided, oh, I'm supposed to have this.
Right.
This is normal. And so that kind of plays into part why many people won't get out to vote, because they just feel like, oh, it's always going to be there. But they fail to realize that there are still tools, there are still people that are out there doing their very best to suppress at every means the vote. So how do we take that story and turn it into a victory, or what's a tangible thing for the young people, or just people in general who are apathetic about voting?
Well, it's up to us in leadership.
Yes.
First of all, what we've decided to do, we must get that information in small bites.
Yes.
It can't be 15, 20 minutes.
How do you eat an elephant?
Right. One bite at a time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that. We are active on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We are doing a series of messages to talk about why it's important. You know, from Medicaid expansion to student loans, and also we have to use those success stories that we have as demonstrations. You know, we use Maynard Jackson's mayor story. Oh yeah. You know, Maynard Jackson decided if black people don't help build this airport, we won't have a new airport.
That's true.
Yeah. And so it takes champions like that. Now that's the other thing. You know, we have so many people. You know, when we hit the streets when I was a kid, we thought that if we could just get some black people in office, they would look after our
make the difference.
Now that has not been the case.
Amen.
but it's partially our fault because we don't hold them accountable, you know,
as much as we do everyone else.
And everyone else. And we should do that.
Yes.
I mean, we just lost a councilman in Atlanta, died too soon.
Yes.
He was a horrible councilman. I mean, he did nothing for that community.
Wow.
His council district is the most gentrified in the city. And so, but we, you know, we speak with him in glowing tribute.
That's what we do.
We don't need that kind of person again. We have to call these people out. I mean, we have to require them to serve the people that elected them.
Yes.
If those people don't serve you, they shouldn't be serving you.
You know, it's true that you speak of that because it's a never a failing moment that when election time is on the rise, I see signs but never see the candidate. Right. The signs are plastered all up and down Cascade, all up and down Camp Creek Parkway, anywhere that we, you know, basically rule the population of the area. And the question is asked, where is the member? You know, have you spoken to them? Have they told you anything about what they're doing? There are some elected officials right now. I can't tell you what they've done in the past 15 or 20 years. Right. I don't know what they've done other than put a yard sign out there to be reelected. Right. And you're right in that we, it's sad, but sometimes we let us pass.
We do.
All too often.
Well, we do it all the time.
Yeah, all too often just to say that we got a black person in office. And what good is that if that black person is not, or if that colored person is not doing anything to benefit your community? I watched the video, and as a matter of fact, it was Griggs that put it up. It was a young lady talking about, and I say young lady, but she was a seasoned saint, talking about the importance of local elections and how it matters most. And I think, again, going back to that complacency, people just forget that somebody is having to make the laws and the policies for our city, and we should be actively engaged in what these laws and policies are. But unfortunately, we're asleep at the wheel.
Well, right. And one of the things, NAACP has to be stronger. I've taken it upon myself to emphasize we cannot get involved. We are nonpartisan. We can't get involved in the race. Correct. But we can get involved before the race. Yes. And so we are starting to do that. We are calling people in. We have a committee that works with the school board. People don't understand how important the school board is.
I preach that here all the time. That is my go-to talk. If I can't talk about nothing else here, I talk about the school board. Yeah,
it is very important.
Yes.
And you know, as an accountant, I've worked for a lot of different organizations. I've done some work for a nursing home. So if you come into a nursing home, they don't judge you by your age, by your gender. Yes. By your height, by your age.
None of that.
They look at what you are able to do for the 10 basic principles. Yeah. They have a care plan. I think we ought to have a care plan for these students that come into the school every year.
I love it.
You know, even back in segregation days in Memphis, Tennessee, we had a standardized test at the beginning of the year. We had one at the end of the year. Yes. So a teacher had tools to see what the progress
where
was,
I needed to move.
Where you are right now.
Exactly.
Where you are right now. Now let me see what I can do to get you there.
Absolutely.
We need that in every school, for every affected child in every affected neighborhood. Yes. We have to understand the legacy of oppression is deprivation. Yes. I mean, all of this is based on poverty, which is the design, the two objectives of oppression. Right. Are degradation, take away your dignity. Yes. And deprivation, take away your resources. Wow. We have to know that has worked. It is by design. We still have to tear up this system. Yes. Just because a few of us get out. You know?
Right.
And, you know, I count myself, you know, I'm fortunate. My mother was a teacher. My grandfather was a minister.
Yes.
My father was a minister.
Yes.
You know, but we understood and we were taught you have to give something back to this community.
Absolutely. You know, that is key in and of itself. I don't think that message is being disseminated enough, that you have to give something back. My life, you know, I share this any opportunity I get. My life is a life of service. I think I was 13 or 14, Mr. Rose, when I adopted the song as my life motto. If I can help somebody along life's journey,
I know this song,
then my living will not be in vain. And all of my life, in some shape, form, or fashion, I have tried my very best to be that person to help somebody, because that's what's important to me. Because at the end of the day, only what we do for Christ will last.
Right.
And so I say this in contents, and I use this story all the time. My father was not a preacher like I am, and he was not an avid churchgoer or anything like that. But my father believed in God, and he believed in worship. But what I always say that he believed in more than anything is the conversation that Christ had with disciples. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me drink? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was homeless, did you give me shelter? When I was in prison, did you visit me? My father believed in that. And I don't think that we give enough voice to what we need to do for others. I think that we have allowed this generation, including my generation, but definitely the ones to follow, the opportunity to skip out on service for others, simply because the message is not being conveyed enough to them. They don't understand that service, it should be in the heart. And when you serve others, it does something for you. I think they say that the sun, when you go out in the sun, it gives you vitamin D. It does something to your body to make you feel good. For me, service does that. And we, in some shape, form, or fashion, have to convey that same message to the younger generation to let them know that service will give you a good feeling.
Right.
And I think we've gotten away from that. I think some way, some shape, form, or fashion, we have to learn to get that message out again. What is the NAACP doing right now concerning, or are there any thoughts, I should say, surrounding all the presidential candidates that have come forward in this current election cycle?
Well, you know, normally national issues are handled by our national body.
Correct.
Now we have input.
Yes.
And so we will be dealing with input. You might know, of course, I've been focusing on all of the symbolism as it relates to racism.
Correct.
Because what I recognize is that these monuments and symbols teach bigotry.
Oh, yes.
They are, you know, and there's so many signs around. There are 10 military bases named for Confederate generals.
Yeah, of course.
We're the only country in the history of the world that celebrates a failed insurrection against itself.
Absolutely.
And it's all because of racism.
Yeah.
There's no logic behind it.
Right.
And so we will be, Atlanta branch will be, we've submitted a resolution to the national for our convention this summer to do two things. One, to focus on, to demand some form of reparation to begin with.
I'm glad you mentioned reparations, because that's exactly where I was going next. So you just opened that door for me.
Okay.
So tell me, what do you think about candidates saying that we deserve reparations? Now, do I agree that we deserve it? I absolutely do. But how do you think that? So I say this in the contents of, I feel like that's one of those things to engender the black vote. I may be wrong. They may very well believe this, but I believe that's one of those things that if I could say this, then I'm guaranteed to get this group of people to vote for me. Do you think that's a true thing that could ever come to pass in this country?
Well, this is a start for me. Start by stop celebrating the Confederacy, which was to continue enslaving people of color in perpetuity.
Correct.
That's the first thing. Second thing, to understand what this system has done in terms of equity, to deny us equity.
Okay.
You know, we recognize that people go to war, they have horrific experiences, they have post-traumatic stress syndrome. Well, with black folk, it's nothing post about it. It's traumatic.
You're right.
It's traumatic stress syndrome
from cradle to grave.
From cradle to grave.
Yeah.
So we need access to mental health, to therapy.
Yes.
We need sociological and psychological inputs in our school from kindergarten forward.
Right.
To make up for all these things that they have done for us. Legacy system issues.
Yes.
That's what we need. We need to be guaranteed educational opportunities.
Right.
Because they were denied to us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I grew up, my mother was a teacher.
Yes.
But let me tell you where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Her uncle was a sharecropper, decided that he, in the Florida County, Mississippi, heard about a boarding school for colored and Indian girls in West Point, Mississippi.
Yeah.
15 years her senior, he said he sent his baby sister over there.
Yeah.
His baby sister was my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
She sent her 4 daughters there.
Yes.
They had to go there because that was not another school, public school for black folk.
Yes.
And so she got an education. Of course, we continue to pass it on.
Yes.
But the legacy of that, think about all those other, that were like 400 girls in that school.
Wow.
What about the rest of the population of female population in black and Indian students in Mississippi?
That didn't get even close to it.
That didn't get close to it. And so what did they have to pass on?
My goodness. Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. We have to, if they talk about reparation, what's the implementation plan? I want to be on the, I want to help them develop an implementation
That's always the question for me. We have all these, for lack of a better phrase, lofty ideas or lofty plans, but I never really see what the outline is.
Right.
How do you really plan to make this to come to pass?
Right.
And I think what you said is a very good start. Because unfortunately, like I know, when people think of reparations, they automatically think of the dollar.
They're looking for a check.
They're looking for the dollar.
Yeah.
But I think the means to the money, to the money is what matters most.
Right.
Because I can give you $1 million, but if you don't know how to use it to invest it, then you'll be back where you were, to start with. So I think a means to it makes all the difference in the world. And you're right. There are some of us who were fortunate to have those family members, those uncles, those aunts, those mothers, those fathers, grandparents to enforce and instill that stuff in us. But what about the others who didn't have it? And the unfortunate thing is that for those who didn't have it, for some of us who did have it, turn our nose to them.
Right. Well, we forget that we didn't start the race.
That's correct.
We didn't hear the gun sound.
Yes.
We just have that baton for a short period of time.
Absolutely.
And somebody brought it to us.
Yeah.
I know where mine came from. I'm grateful.
Yes.
But I have to remind my peers that it just didn't start with you.
Correct.
Plus that,
that's
every
good.
Basketball player is not going to be LeBron James.
Listen,
some of them just do not have the ability.
These parents
you just
out
can't
here,
kick them away.
Yeah.
I like basketball in high school, but I was 5'4" coming out of high school.
Yeah.
I knew I had to go to the library.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you got to be realistic about it, in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Recognize what it is. How do we move forward?
Yes.
What is the plan, and how do we implement this plan?
That's really good. So, in keeping with this of what I'm hearing of some of the candidates, so we have other presidential candidates who are talking about, back to no student loans and free, college. Do you see that as viable? Do you see that as tangible?
It's absolutely smoke in the clouds. In the first place,
I'm with you.
In the first place, there are very few federal colleges.
Yeah.
We talking about University of District of Columbia.
Yeah.
We talking about Howard University.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
So the presidential candidate cannot affect Georgia Tech or University of Georgia,
correct,
or Fort Valley,
all
or
private,
Savannah State.
all private.
No, those are state schools.
State schools. Yes.
And then they can't begin to affect the private school.
Correct. Correct.
So we need a different plan.
Yes.
Just to say free tuition, that's not. You can't implement that.
Right. Right.
You know, for a long time, California had free tuition for in-state students.
Yes.
But that's you know, they had a candidate the last time, and I was not for that candidate because of his position is we have free tuition. Yeah. I knew you can't do that.
Yeah,
you know, I want to know what can be implemented.
Absolutely.
What can really, how can we do this?
Right.
And some of the things, and that's my analytical background.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, now you said that, now what we're going to do?
Now what we do?
It's just
Where
like,
do we go from here?
That's right. It's just like Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
You say, okay, let's meet. All right, what's the menu?
Yes, sir.
You know, how we going to get there?
Yeah.
Who's cooking this?
That's right. That's right.
Everything takes a
We
plan.
got to know something.
That's
we got to know how we're going to get there. So you have a board of active members, and I mentioned earlier Mr. Griggs,
right,
and how gangfully involved he is, and how without question he is everywhere. Yeah. He is everywhere. And he and I are in the same age bracket. So, you know, how do we harness that type of motivation and that type of passion into the next generation? How do we do that?
Well, we have to lead by example. That's the first thing.
Yes.
And, you know, as I mentioned to you before we went on air, I recruited Griggs.
Yeah.
And I recruited some other people. Now, he's been... you know, he's a superstar.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but you're going to find superstars everywhere.
That's right. That's
but
right.
I got some good people behind him. We will continue to let him exercise his good judgment, his abilities.
Yes.
And the message, he gets the message out.
Right.
You know, we work on messaging. He does a good job. I do my messaging toward another age group.
Right, right.
And then we've got another group that's going after the high school students.
Correct.
And we want to show them something.
Yes.
You know, we take them down to Montgomery. They will see what the lynching memorial, which will really tell a story.
Yes.
Let me tell you my own story about the lynching memorial. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. The county is Shelby.
Yes, sir.
You know, for every county in every state where they have recorded lynchings, there's a coffin replica. Okay, so that's one for Fulton County. So when I was there, I looked for Fulton County and had, you know, quite a few people on it.
Yes.
All right. And then I looked for Shelby County and it had more people on it. All right. But when I looked for LaFleur County, Mississippi, where my mother's people are from,
yes,
it was double column and small print to contain all of the names. Now, LaFleur County never had more than 20,000 people in it.
My God.
Ever. And it made me think about a conversation I had with my great aunt in maybe 1984. Actually, it was 1978. And she was a farmer. They had my great grandfather was a farmer. And so we were sitting out looking at the lake, which ran in front of the house. And I was asking her about all her brothers and sisters. It was 11 of them, including my grandfather.
Yes.
And she started talking about where they went. And then she got to one brother, Ulysses. She said, you know, we never knew what happened to him. And when I saw that list of lynchings, it struck me like a lightning bolt.
Yes.
And I said, now this, because people just disappeared.
Yes.
You know, some of them they made a spectacle of.
Right.
But most of them they didn't.
My goodness.
You know, just found them on the side of the road.
Yes, yes.
You know, and so so they didn't make a big deal out of it, except to warn us in a subtle way.
Absolutely.
That white folks would be white folks.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's
where they
something.
came from. So
now, did you? And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. In looking at that list, were you able to find your uncle?
He was not on the list. He was not on the list.
Yes.
Which gave me the other message that there were a lot of people still not on the list.
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
He's not the only one wasn't on the list.
I'm sure that's the same thing everywhere. There's a lot of them whose name didn't make it on the list. But that is amazing to me to just think about. You know, it's one thing to be on a list, you know.
Right.
But it's another thing to take pride into writing somebody's name on a list that you did God knows what to them. You lynched them but that was just the name of it. But you did so much more to them. You burned them. You almost crucified them. Many of the ones that were there. And it's unfortunate to think that this was the way of our land. Friends of mine will say, who are not of our persuasion, and even some of us say, well, we got to get past that. And I say, I don't argue that we have to move forward, but the problem is we stayed in that place too long. And everybody wants me to forget, although I wasn't there, but you want me to forget what was happening to my ancestors and to their ancestors. And it's just hard for me to just say, okay, it has nothing to do with you, when in truth, it might have been your great-grandfather or great-grandmother that had something to do with what took place with my ancestors.
Well, the irony is, on the one hand, they tell us to get over it.
Yeah.
But we just had Confederate Memorial Day last Monday here in Georgia.
Still going.
Still going. Yeah. Georgia is home to the largest shrine of white supremacy in the history of the world.
I know it.
So as a friend, as one of them, our education committee chair said, we'll quit playing the race card if you quit dealing it.
Listen, and there's 52 cards in this deck. You decide when you want to start dealing and stop dealing it. That's so true. That's so true. And it's unfortunate that, 400 years of oppression, which continues now. And some people they turn a blind eye to it and act as if though it doesn't exist. And it still exists.
Well, it still
and it's
exists.
sad that, in today's society, it's a true story, Mr. Rose. When I was in the Army moved me to Macomb, Mississippi, and I was stationed there for 3 years as an Army recruiter. I love that place dearly. It's one of my favorite places to go to now. But my recruiting partner, my colleague, white guy, same height, same build, wore glasses. We called each other twins. We would say we were twins. But he warned me. He says, Joe, I'm gonna tell you. Well, he says Flint, but he says, Flint, I'll tell you that some of these schools are not going to be receptive of you. He says, I just want to be honest with you. He says, that's just the law of the land down here still. I said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I can go anywhere. I can walk anywhere. Ain't nobody going to stop me. I'm Atlanta Joe. I can go anywhere. And, but I was taken aback, if you will, when we went to one school in Amite County, and they met me at the door. They had never seen a black Army recruiter. And they took the gifts or the things that I brought for the school inside and said, we'll make sure it's disseminated, to the people. Now, when he and I went back, I was welcomed with open arms. But when I was there by myself, they met me at the door. And at first I said to myself, again, my Atlanta mind said I can walk and go anywhere. I said, well, maybe something was going on in the school. And I told her about it. He said, Joe, no. He says, I'm telling you, that was not the case. They didn't want you in there. And so my first real account of racism, I'm a grown man, just came from war, been to Afghanistan, and now I'm in Mississippi. And this was really the first true account. And I think I might have been 24, 25 years old at the time. And the more I think about it, I said, man, I never encountered it, but it's real. It still happens to this day. And oddly enough, and I don't like to paint Mississippi as a racist place, because Georgia probably beats Mississippi, but I had other encounters. But even at that, I shook it off as, just ignorance, but it's real.
It's real. I tell people, one of the things I remind them that the cross in front of a building signals that it's a Christian church. And we know Christ
signals.
It says, that's what is here.
Yeah.
Now, whatever goes on inside or should, that's another story.
Yes, sir.
But by the same token, these Confederate monuments also send a signal.
Yes, sir.
They tell us what is supposed to go on. And because these monuments are on public spaces, it is as if government is endorsing white supremacy.
Yeah, they signing that check.
They sign it. In Montgomery, Alabama, and we talk about Montgomery for the lynching, but it's another lesson of Montgomery, Alabama. For the longest, there were 4 high schools, 2 black and 2 white. The first black high school was Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, come on. That name is familiar. I don't want to say that to our producer, but I like the name of that school. But please continue.
So Booker T. Washington, founded Tuskegee.
Yes, sir.
Right down the street from Montgomery.
That's correct.
He was a great educator.
Yes.
You could kids could go and say, I may be a great educator.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
The second was with George Washington Carver. Great scientist. Did a lot for agriculture for everybody.
Yes.
All farmers in the South, black, white, whatever.
Yes.
And you could take inspiration from that. The other two white schools were Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee.
Sounds familiar.
What is the lesson they taught those students?
Yeah.
What did they tell them?
Clearly. The name says it in itself.
Says it in itself.
Yeah.
So all of the symbology means something.
Yes.
And it's part of the normalization of racism.
Yeah.
Racism is accept. So Richard B. Russell, senator from Georgia, has two buildings named for him.
Yeah.
One in D.C., one in Atlanta.
And he earned them.
He not only did he vote against every civil rights bill that came before the Senate while he's out, he filibustered them all.
Every last one.
Every one he tried to block.
He had more hold on the South than any other senator.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was a great man.
Yes, he was.
He was just racist.
That's it. He was a great man, except he was racist. That's exactly right.
Racism needs to be a non-starter.
Yeah.
Our current president just made a statement yesterday about the attack on the Jewish synagogue. And he said, it's evil to be anti-Semitic. I agree with it.
Yes.
It's also evil to be racist.
That's correct. That's correct.
Racism should not be an alternative, acceptable political philosophy.
Right.
It is an evil against humanity, and it ought to be termed as so.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. Mr. Rose, I think we're going to take a quick break here on WCEG. Give us a chance to wet our whistle here for a moment. But I've enjoyed this conversation thus far. It's few things that excite me in life now, but I love when the conversation can share history and shine light on where we can go from here. I love that you can come across a gamut of conversations about this and not just stopping at one level. All too often when we're referring to voter registration and lynching and anything that takes place with the past, most people just stay there, but they have no thought process and no plans for what we should take in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break here on WCEG Talk Radio, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group here on The People's Choice. I'm your host, Joe Flint, and we're talking live with Richard Rose, president of the Atlanta branch of the NAACP. We'll be right back.